Hello, and welcome to an online event brought to you by Parkinson's Community Los Angeles. Today, we are talking about meal planning for Parkinson's with registered dietitian Jelena. I'm Patrick Lasasso, president of PCLA. For those of you who don't know us, we are a nonprofit that supports families living with Parkinson's through free education programs, support groups, social events, and more. Today's Let's Talk Parkinson's program is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Abbott, Boston Scientific, Kiowa Kirin, and by donations from people in the Parkinson's community just like you. If you appreciate our programming, please consider making a tax-deductible donation on our website at PCLA.org. That's PCLA.org. And thank you for attending tonight. Just a few quick notes before we get started. We are recording tonight's event for our PCLA YouTube channel. And if you don't know about that channel, you should check it out. It's got tons of amazing, informative presentations. For tonight, you will only be visible in the recording if you are speaking. Please stay muted to keep background noise to a minimum. And after the presentation, there will be time for questions. You can also submit them through the chat, and we'll get to those first thing at the end. We're so lucky tonight to have with us Jelena Adamovich. Jelena is a registered dietitian nutritionist with a master's degree in nutritional science. She currently travels to different hospital facilities around the country to provide medical nutrition therapy. She also works with private clients with Parkinson's disease by providing them with personalized nutrition counseling and diet plans. Jelena became passionate about helping individuals living with PD from a personal experience caring for her father with Parkinson's. As part of her graduate project, she published research that explored the therapeutic role that nutrition can play in managing the disease. Her research was used to create a cookbook that focused on foods rich in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids. Jelena enjoys cooking and using food as medicine by creating meals that are nutritious, and I like this part, and easy to prepare. Please join me in welcoming Jelena Adamovich, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, Jelena.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was a great introduction. So the title of the presentation tonight is Meal Prepping for Parkinson's, and it's advice from a dietitian, myself. So if you'll just go to the next slide. Okay, so Patrick already did a really great job of introducing me. So some of my credentials are listed here above. So you know that you're getting your nutrition advice from a registered dietitian. And like Patrick has mentioned, I have both my master's and bachelor's degrees in nutritional science. And I work as a clinical dietitian. So I work in a hospital and I practice medical nutrition therapy where I am traveling around the country. I'm currently in New Mexico, but I'm from Los Angeles. And I also do private practice work where I see clients one-on-one to provide nutrition counseling. So if you'll just go to the next slide. Again, Patrick introduced some of this information already, but here's a little bit about my experience working with Parkinson's. So from a personal experience standpoint, I caregave for a loved one. So my dad lived with Parkinson's disease. So that was a very insightful experience as to what it's like for somebody who's living with Parkinson's disease. And my experience with him motivated me to do some research when I was in graduate school. So I published some research that basically explored the therapeutic role of nutrition in Parkinson's disease. And I specifically looked at how dietary antioxidants and omega-3s play a protective role against Parkinson's disease progression. I've been a speaker at Parkinson's support groups where I've given nutrition presentations and cooking demonstrations. And then I work with personal clients with Parkinson's disease by providing them with nutrition counseling. Next slide. And I wanted to start the presentation with just addressing some potential barriers to meal prepping and cooking. So there are some motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease that may impact somebody's ability to cook. And that would be symptoms such as tremor, rigidity, bradykinesia, gait, postural instability, balance, and coordination. And then some of the non-motor symptoms that may impact cooking would be fatigue and memory loss. So how these symptoms can affect somebody's ability to cook or meal prep. Certain tasks such as chopping or peeling produce may be difficult. Handling heavy pots and pans, holding cooking utensils, safety hazards when using knives or handling hot items, navigating or moving through the kitchen, multitasking, managing time-sensitive cooking steps, feeling too tired or fatigued to cook, and then trouble standing for long periods of time. So these are just things to take into consideration. They may not apply to everybody with Parkinson's disease, since these symptoms are individualized. And for some people, these symptoms are very mild. For others, they're more severe. So how they're going to impact somebody's ability to cook or prepare food is going to be different from one person to the next. Next slide. So I wanted to discuss, these aren't necessarily related to nutrition, but I think that there's some very important ways to address barriers to meal prep and cooking with Parkinson's disease, and how this relates to the symptoms I had just explained in my previous slide. So it'll be really important for you to organize your kitchen space so that it's a safe and accessible environment. So you may want to go through your kitchen and just reorganize it to be a very practical, safe environment by going through and placing the items that you commonly use in a really convenient space. So maybe clearing off your countertop from unnecessary items and putting some of the things that you use frequently, whether it be certain cooking appliances, plateware, utensils, so that they're in an easily accessible place and you're not trying to reach up to a high cabinet or shelf or having to bend over or look for things. If everything is laid out in a very organized space, then it just makes your cooking environment more accessible and safe for you. Another thing that you can do is use adaptive or assistive eating devices and utensils. And I have an example of that on the next slide, but basically what these are is they are specially designed eating devices and utensils. So anybody who has difficulty gripping something like a fork or a spoon, these utensils are specifically designed for people who are dealing with that type of disability. You can also use culinary tools that make cooking safe and efficient. So things like blenders or an electric vegetable chopper or an air fryer, just different appliances and utensils that are going to make the job of cooking an easier task and save you time. You can keep a whiteboard in your kitchen, and you can use this to maybe write down your meal plans for the week or steps for a recipe. You can print out a meal plan or keep printed recipes handy just to stay organized. Another thing that you can do is if you have any trouble standing in one place for a long period of time without getting tired, then you can keep a bar stool next to your countertop, so that way you can sit down when you're chopping or mixing. Similarly, you could sit down at the kitchen table to do tasks like cutting, peeling, and mixing. And then lastly, you could work with an occupational therapist. So occupational therapy is a type of rehabilitation therapy that assists people with daily living tasks. So cooking would fall into that category because cooking is a task that is required for independent living. So if you're struggling with a task like that, you may want to speak with your provider about seeing an occupational therapist, because they really are the specialty that's going to help you adapt to whatever limitations that you're experiencing. So if you'll just go to the next slide. So on this slide, I provide some examples of the assistive devices and culinary tools that make cooking safe and easy. So you could see here the first two pictures with the utensils. This is what I meant by the adaptive or assistive utensils. There's foam grip tubing that you can use to place over your utensils that just make it easier to grip. The foam tubing can also be used for things not related to cooking, like some people will put them on a toothbrush or a razor blade or whatever it is that they need help with gripping. And then the adaptive utensil set are just specially designed utensils for people who have a hard time holding a utensil still. And then there's just other examples on this slide, like cut resistant gloves that could make cutting things safer, having a non-slip kitchen mat in your kitchen to prevent falls or slips, an air fryer to kind of cut down on cooking time, a hand pressure chopper. So if you're having trouble chopping produce, you can buy one of these choppers that makes it a lot more efficient and safe. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. Now I'll get into some of the nutrition related ways to make meal prepping and cooking with Parkinson's easier. So you can save a lot of time and address some of the physical barriers to cooking by choosing foods that require little to no preparation. So some of the physical limitations, such as difficulty chopping, can be resolved by purchasing pre-cut food items or like pre-cut produce and meat. There's plenty of convenient food options that are nutritious and contribute to a balanced diet. So a good example of this would be frozen fruits and vegetables. Frozen fruits and vegetables actually retain all of their nutritive values. So they have just the same amount of vitamin and mineral content as fresh produce would be, but they come in a form that is usually easier to prepare because it cuts down on the time of washing and chopping produce. So if you'll just go to the next slide, I'll give some more examples of these foods. Examples of food items that require minimal to no prep or cook time. So I kind of mentioned like frozen produce. There's also produce that comes in steam bags, like broccoli that you can just pop the bag into the microwave and then in about 3 minutes, it's done. Versus if you were to buy, let's say, a raw head of broccoli at the grocery store, so much more time goes into washing it, chopping it, and cooking it. So something that may take you 15 to 20 minutes to do with a fresh head of broccoli versus maybe 3 minutes to cook some frozen broccoli significantly cuts down on your time in the kitchen. And again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, it's just the same amount of nutrition, whether it's fresh produce or frozen produce. You can also find frozen pre-cooked meats and seafood or frozen turkey or veggie burger patties. So I actually had quite a few of these things in my refrigerator, so I kept them handy so I could show you. So like, this is an example of something, I would hold it upside down. This is an example of like some frozen veggie patties that maybe take me a couple minutes to cook. And then another thing that is on the list is the microwavable rice packets. So that's another thing that I keep handy. So it comes in the frozen section and the only ingredient is organic brown rice. And they come in little bags where you can just throw it in the microwave and then in 3 minutes, you have some cooked rice. And then I also keep a lot of frozen produce because produce is another thing that I find that if I don't use it right away, it goes bad. So it leads to a lot of food waste. And on some weeks when I'm busy and just can't get around to cooking all the produce that I thought was a great idea to buy when I was at the grocery store, at least with the frozen produce, you're limiting your food waste because this is a lot more sustainable. It's not going to go bad in the freezer. So all together with like the brown rice packets, the frozen vegetables, and the veggie burger patties, I can create a meal in less than 30 minutes. And it's a nutritious meal. So if you could just go to the next slide, please. So again, these are just some examples of foods that are nutritious and require minimal preparation. So I had mentioned the rice packets, frozen veggies. There's things like steamed lentils that are pre-cooked, baked tofu, ready to eat hard-boiled eggs, chicken meat that is pre-cooked and shredded, and then instant oatmeal packets. The list can go on and on about all the different foods that come in a form that is convenient for you to prepare. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to get into how to create a nutritious meal. Basically, a nutritious meal is one that is balanced with a portion of macronutrients and micronutrients that are essential for human health. So if you look at this image that I have on this slide, the macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And each of those nutrients serve a different role in our body and our health. So carbohydrates are going to be the nutrient that gives you energy. Fats or lipids are going to do things like they serve as a cushion to protect our organs. Our body stores fat for stored energy. They protect cellular function. And then protein has a lot of structural functions. So like retaining our muscle mass, our hair, our fingernails. And then your micronutrients, which are here on the other side of the image, are going to be vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. And you're going to get those from eating a variety of fruits and vegetables. So it's really important to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables because different fruits and vegetables have different vitamins and minerals. So you just want to make sure that you're not eating the same fruits or the same vegetables all the time and that you're adding in variety. And then a balanced meal should be satisfying, keep you feeling satiated, and give you energy. So really big emphasis on the satisfying part. Just because you're eating healthy, so to speak, doesn't mean that you're not enjoying your food. Nobody should ever have to force themselves to eat a meal that they don't enjoy, in my opinion. And that's the advice that I'm giving to you. So just find creative ways to make these nutritious meals satisfying. And by keeping you feeling satiated, ideally a balanced meal would keep you feeling full for about 2 hours or so until your next meal. If you find that you're feeling hungrier sooner than that, like within 30 minutes to an hour of eating, you just kind of want to look back at the meal that you ate and see, did it have all the micronutrients that are required for a balanced meal? Did I have enough carbohydrates and protein to keep me satiated? If not, you may just want to add in extra calories to your meals so that they're keeping you full longer. So if you could just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so with the information that I just provided you on the last slide, we'll get into how to build a balanced meal. So my plate is referring to this image that I have on this slide. You want to use this, it's called My Plate, and it's this model for how to build a balanced meal. And it's a really great reference tool because I think that just telling somebody to eat a portion of meat or carbohydrates or fruits and vegetables, it's just a tedious task, in my opinion, to sit out and weigh out a portion of each meal, or I'm sorry, each food item, when you can just use this plate as a guide for how to build a well-balanced meal. So in the previous slide, I had discussed making sure that you include all 3 macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and making sure that you include micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. So how you're going to build a plate around that is half of your plate, as you can see in this image, should consist of fresh fruits and vegetables. For the vegetable section, ideally you want non-starchy vegetables. So things like spinach, kale, Brussels sprouts, green beans, asparagus, and then a quarter of your plate should be whole grains or carbohydrates. And I provided a list on this slide of examples of carbohydrates. So those are going to be things like rice, oats, pasta, noodles, bread, tortillas, starchy vegetables, all the good things that we want half of our plate to be filled with, but ideally it's just a quarter of our plate that would be carbohydrates. And then The other quarter of your plate is going to be a protein source. So your protein foods are going to be things like eggs, fish, seafood, meat, poultry, soy, tofu products, if you're plant-based, things like beans, lentils. And then if you can see here on the image, there's a portion of fat. So you want to make sure that you also include some healthy fat with your meal. So that can come from the cooking oil that you're using, like olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, nuts, seeds, dairy products, avocados, olives. Those are all great sources of fats. And then there's also a picture of water in the image because you also want to make sure that you're staying adequately hydrated. So you could go to the next slide. Okay, so now these are examples of easy to make balanced meals. So we already went over the foods that can be purchased in a convenient form, and we already went over what a nutritious balanced meal consists of. So here I provided an example of 3 different days worth of breakfast, lunch, snacks, and dinner that are made from foods that require minimal to no preparation, and each meal is balanced with the right macronutrients. So for example, if you look at the first meal example that I provided for breakfast, quick oats, that's going to give you carbohydrates, milk of choice and almond butter, that'll give you a healthy fat. Fresh berries are going to provide you with some antioxidants, and then a ready to eat hard-boiled egg would provide you with some protein. So if you just kind of glance over the different examples, each of these meals would take no more than 30 minutes to make. Like for example, the lunch option for the first day, a salad kit with pre-cooked chicken or canned garbanzo beans for protein, avocado, and then crackers and hummus on the side. Balanced meal will take you less than 30 minutes to make. So these are just to give you guys like practical examples with the information that I just provided in the previous slide, so you can kind of get an idea of how you'll use that to build nutritious meals that won't take you very long to cook. Next slide. Okay, so this is how you're going to meal plan the smart way. So what I would suggest doing, which sometimes I'm really good about, but sometimes I just rush to the store and buy whatever sounds good at the moment. But ideally, this would be the practical way to plan your meals for the week. So if you go through your kitchen and take an inventory of the food that you currently have in your pantry or refrigerator and plan meals around the foods that you need to use, that's going to save you money because you're not buying more than what you need. And it's also going to reduce food waste because you're kind of using what you already have. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go through my refrigerator and my pantry and I'll just kind of make a list of different things that I have: rice, pasta, vegetables that I need to use, maybe some meat that I need to use. And I'll kind of sit down and look at that list and figure out what kind of meals I can make from the items that I already have. So if you want to use the My Plate example in the previous slide for planning balanced meals for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, and making sure that you're including all of the nutrients, protein, carbohydrates, healthy fats, fruits, and vegetables, then with that list that you're going to make, you're basically going to sit down and come up with ideas for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And make a grocery list for the items that you need for the week. And then you're going to want to go through that grocery list and identify the items that come in a form that requires minimal prep time or cook time. So not every food is going to come in a form that's easy to prepare depending on what you're planning on cooking. But if you can at least figure out of the items that you need, which of these foods come in a form like frozen, pre-chopped, pre-washed, so that it can cut down on the time that I'm spending cooking. And then if you want to be super organized, you can keep a printed weekly meal plan, like maybe put it on your refrigerator, just so that you already kind of have a general idea of what you're going to have to eat, because sometimes it can just be kind of overwhelming when you're like, I don't know what I'm going to make tonight. And then you just grab the most convenient thing. Maybe it's not even a real meal. You just grab some chips and hummus because you're really hungry. But if you have more of a plan outlined for yourself, then you kind of know what to expect. And it's just a lot easier to get a meal made. So if you'll go to the next slide. Here's just an example of a grocery shopping list. Mine's not this organized, I'll be honest. I usually organize mine by like which grocery store I want to get certain items at. But if you want to make sure that you're choosing foods from each of those macronutrient categories that we had discussed, then maybe organizing your grocery list in a format that is similar to this, where you have like your produce, your dairy, eggs, dried good, frozen foods, meat, poultry, fish, then kind of having it out on paper in front of you, you're able to say, okay, it looks like I got a list of items of produce that I'm going to get. I see that I have a list of proteins that I'm getting, dried goods, and it can just help keep you more organized. And then also, when you go to the grocery store, it's easier because it's organized by category. So you're not kind of going all over the place in the grocery store. You're going to one section at a time according to your list. So next slide. So I'm just going to briefly touch on this because we have a previous presentation where I go into more depth about foods that I recommend for Parkinson's. I just wanted to lightly touch on it because I know that some of the participants may not have seen that previous video, or it just may be something that you guys are interested in hearing again. So one of the top foods that I recommend for Parkinson's disease are antioxidants. Antioxidants in simple terms are compounds that are found primarily in plant-based foods, so like fruits and vegetables, and they have a beneficial therapeutic effect, or are believed to have a beneficial therapeutic effect against Parkinson's disease progression, which if you are interested in exploring that topic a little bit more, then on the slide where I introduced myself and my credentials, I had given the title of the research article that I published that goes into a lot more depth about this. So if it's something that you're interested in exploring, then check out the research article. But some examples of antioxidant foods that are rich in antioxidants are berries. So I always tell people just to keep berries on hand. It can be fresh berries or frozen berries. So things like blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, cherries, blackberries. Those antioxidant compounds are found in the rich pigment of berries. So those really blue, purple, red, black colors that berries have, that's where the antioxidants are. And you can add those foods to cereals, oatmeal, yogurt. You can, and as an excuse to have dessert, I'm always looking for an excuse to have dessert. So if you want to make like a berry cobbler, you can do that, or put it in muffins. You can blend it into smoothies. That's another thing that I do often, is I keep frozen mixed berries and use them in my smoothies. Another food source that is very rich in antioxidants are cruciferous vegetables. So these are things like broccoli, cauliflower, arugula, kale. You can add these to salads or vegetable stir fries. You can put them in soups, pastas, casseroles, scramble them with eggs or tofu. And then there's actually a lot of spices that contain antioxidants and phytochemicals. So turmeric is a really good example, because it contains a compound called curcumin, which is anti-inflammatory. So if you want to just keep turmeric as one of your staple spices that you add to different dishes, Also, cinnamon, ginger, and cacao are just some of the other examples. There's a number of spices that have antioxidants and phytochemicals, but you can do things like add cinnamon and cacao to baked goods, add turmeric to soups, curry, or marinades, add ginger to soups, stir fries, and marinades. So if you just go to the next slide, please. So then the next category of foods that I recommend for Parkinson's are omega-3 fatty acids. It's a type of fatty acid that, again, has a perceived therapeutic role against Parkinson's, which, like I mentioned in the previous slide, if you're interested in exploring that more, then you can watch the video that we just mentioned or read my research article for more details on that. But omega-3 fatty acids, one of the richest sources of this fat is going to be found in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. I'm one of those people that loves sardines. I don't know why. I feel like, I don't know if everybody loves sardines, but I love sardines. So I'll have like sardines with a salad or with some bread. You can bake or grill fish, add it to salads. So maybe aiming to eat, let's say, salmon or sardines twice a week, I think would be a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids. They're also found in walnuts. So I put a lot of references of things you can add to baked goods because, like I said, I'm a dessert person. So any excuse to eat dessert, you could add some walnuts to like a cookie recipe. You can add them to salads, yogurt parfaits, oatmeal. Seeds are another source of omega-3s. So flax seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, which you can add to smoothies, yogurt parfaits, oatmeal, and cereals. So you may just want to keep in your pantry walnuts and seeds to snack on and add to different dishes. Maybe it would be helpful if you got like different mason jars and keep those on your countertops with the different nuts and seeds. That way, when you're cooking and preparing dishes, they're readily available. So you could say, oh, I could add some walnuts to this or add some chia seeds. So supplements, whenever you use supplements when your intakes of certain nutrients cannot be met through diet. So we prefer that you get your nutrients through food, but in some cases, supplements are a beneficial way of getting those nutrients. So you can get like a fish oil supplement. If you're plant-based and you want omega-3s, then you can get that from flax oil or algae oil. And then I think this concludes, yes, so this concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly informative. So I've got some questions in the chat. We're doing really good on time. So let me get through the chat questions.
Sure.
And then we'll open it up to spoken questions. So maybe as we're doing this, you guys can make sure you know how to pop yourselves off of mute. But let's jump right in. And the first question we had was from Cindy, and it's interesting because you just addressed sardines, but she apparently has heard that sardines are not recommended. Have you ever heard that? And is there a reason for that?
I think that the concern is that certain fish may have higher mercury content. I'll be honest, it's not a topic that I've deeply explored, so I can't give a strong opinion on it. I would just say that I'm pretty sure some of the canned fish packaging, I feel like I remember recalling that some of them will say like mercury safe, or they may have some type of seal that say that they've been tested for mercury. Would just look for something like that. It's really up to the person. I would say that the benefit of getting omega-3s from sardines is a reason to eat them. But if you're concerned with something like mercury content, then I would just do a little bit more research on the validity of that, but also finding out which brand of sardines may be a better option.
Go to another chat question here, and you actually answered this in the last presentation you did for us, and I simply loved your answer. Besides losing muscle mass, I'm losing weight. How can I gain it back?
Oh, I know which part of my presentation you like. I think that you should always prioritize gaining weight if you're losing a lot of weight, especially if you're losing weight unintentionally, right? So if you're intentionally trying to lose weight, that's one thing. But if you're just unintentionally dropping a lot of weight, then you want to add as many calories to your diet as possible and prioritize that. So in my previous presentation, I had mentioned eating really calorically dense foods like peanut butter and ice cream and, maybe full fat dairy. So don't buy like low fat or 2%, but buy like the whole milk or the full fat option, and basically choose foods that are really high in calories, because your priority is to get up to a healthy weight. Once you get up to a healthy weight, then you can start being a little bit more restrictive, so to speak, by watching what you're eating, but always prioritize getting in enough calories.
Great. So I'm going to jump to this chat question. What about plastic bags? Is it okay to heat up? And relevant to that, if you have a choice between microwaving and steaming, does it matter? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's an interesting question because I'm not a specialist in like the plastic, but I think that if it's microwavable safe, I would microwave it. If you're concerned about the plastic, then I would just take it out of the plastic bag and maybe put it in a bowl with a paper towel on top, because it'll still steam that way. I think that it just comes down to a preference. If I see a package and it says microwavable safe container, then I would feel comfortable microwaving it. But if I was unsure about it or unsure about the packaging, then I would just take it out and put it in a bowl and cover it with a paper towel to steam it that way. I microwave things. If you prefer to steam things on the stovetop, it really comes down to your preference and how much time you want to save.
Okay. So Cindy asked an important question. I think you can address this. What are the total calories for these meals? And I guess relevant to that, how should someone calculate what the caloric intake for them is for their daily intake of calories?
Sure. So that question is very individualized, right? Because everybody has different caloric needs depending on factors like age, gender, activity status. Some people are sedentary, some people are very active, depending on different disease states. So for certain disease states, you don't require as many calories. For other disease states, you require higher calories. So it's just not a question that I can give a general answer to, because it's very individualized from one person to the next. And also we have a lot of different methods as dietitians for calculating calorie needs. I can give you a very, very general rule of thumb, and you might want to write this down just to follow it because it's a little bit mathematic. So you would get your weight in kilograms. So whatever your weight is in pounds, you divide that by 2.2 to get your weight in kilograms. And then our general, like very general, not individualized calorie range is 25 to 30 calories per kilogram of body weight. So you would take 25, multiply it by your weight in kilograms, take 30, multiply that by your weight in kilograms, and that range of those two numbers would be your calorie needs. Again, that's a very, very general recommendation. So that's specific calories. If you're really interested in it, then you should work with a dietitian who can give you a very personalized approach to how many calories you need, how much protein you need, how much fluids you need. And then as far as those meals go, so I didn't give specific portions, and that's going to matter with calories, right? Because half a cup of brown rice versus a cup of brown rice is different in calories 3 ounces of meat versus 5 ounces of meat are different calories. So the examples that I provided above didn't provide specific amounts of each food. So there were no calorie calculations involved in those. But if something like weight loss or weight gain is a concern of yours and you really want to address it, then like I said, working with a dietitian, they can help determine your nutrient needs, and then they can give you a meal plan with specific amounts of foods to make sure that you're meeting your caloric needs. I hope that was helpful.
Yes. So I have a question about cheese, dairy, and meat. I read that those foods can reduce the effectiveness of Cinemet, which is the levodopa carbidopa.
Okay, I haven't heard that before, so I can't speak to it. The only thing that I can think of related to that is that you should separate your protein intake from your carbidopa levodopa medication administration, because carbidopa levodopa contains an amino acid, which is the L-dopa, and proteins are made up of amino acids. And the thought is that amino acids compete for absorption. So you want to take your Cinemet away from other amino acids, which again are protein. That way you can optimize the absorption of your medication. I haven't heard specifically about, like, those are high protein foods, milk, cheese, meats. So maybe that's what it is.
Constipation is a big symptom for me. What are good options to ease this and go often?
Sure. So again, it's kind of a general question because we'd have to get to the bottom of what was causing somebody's constipation, but just some general recommendations is making sure that you're adequately hydrated, which a lot of people, including myself, think that we're adequately hydrated, but we're really not drinking as much water as we should throughout the day. So really monitoring your fluid intakes to make sure that you're adequately hydrated. Fiber is a really big recommendation, but if you're going to increase your intakes of fiber, you have to increase your intakes of fluid. Otherwise, if you're eating a lot of fiber and you're not drinking enough fluid, it can actually have a constipating effect. So if you're increasing your fiber intake, make sure that you're drinking adequate fluids. Moving around and not being sedentary, so going for walks or doing some type of light exercising gets things moving. Those are just kind of some general recommendations for constipation, but you also just may want to pay a little more attention to the foods you're eating and see if there's any connection between, oh, when I eat this type of food often, I notice that it constipates me more. Or when I include more fiber and water, I notice that I'm going more regularly. So sometimes you just have to take a look at your current diet and try to make an association between what you're eating and the symptoms that you're experiencing.
So Larry asks, how about sunflower seeds? Are pumpkin seeds better?
I don't think one is better than the other. I think that different nuts and seeds have different nutrients in them. So yeah, both of them are nutritious. I don't think one is superior to the other. I think that each nut and seed provides its own nutrition profile. So like I had mentioned previously, you want to have variety in your diet. So it doesn't hurt to have both, because the pumpkin seeds are going to provide you with certain vitamins and minerals, and the sunflower seeds are going to provide you with certain vitamins and minerals. So just switch it up and make sure that you're having a variety of those seeds.
Great. Should red meat and sodas be avoided?
If it's something that you enjoy, I don't think that it has to be avoided. I think that, so let's start with sodas. Sodas are a really sugar sweetened beverage. So it's not something that you want to be your beverage of choice. You don't have to completely eliminate it from your diet, but maybe you just want to be a little bit more mindful about making sure that you're prioritizing water intake over soda intake. For some people, soda is just their drink of choice, and they have very large portions of it, and they have it every single day. And that's going to have more of an effect on your blood sugar. So you just want to make sure that you're prioritizing water intake and treating soda more like a treat than your everyday beverage. Red meat, again, if it's your preference to avoid it, otherwise you don't really have to. Red meat has a lot of nutrients in it, like iron. So it's a really great way to get iron and protein. Red meat isn't something that you eat every single day. It's kind of like earlier when I gave the example of maybe having salmon twice a week. Maybe you have red meat 2 to 3 times a week. But you certainly don't have to completely avoid those things. If you'd like to be more mindful about it, then you can just take those tips into consideration.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So we have a comment here. I'm going to read it. I want to preface it. When we're talking about meds and strategies in terms of that stuff, make sure you always consult with your doctor first.
Mhm.
Catherine says, my husband had a problem with losing weight. His neurologist moved the time he took his Celexa to the evening. That enabled him to sleep through the night, and he immediately started gaining weight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Where can you get or purchase the adaptive utensil?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that, so I just looked it up online. So I just Googled adaptive utensils or assistive utensils. And I also Googled the foam grip tubing. Um, that's the only way I personally know how to find it. But like I'd mentioned about working with an occupational therapist, so there's several different disciplines in medicine, right? Like I'm a dietitian, so you would come to me for nutrition related things, but an occupational therapist is going to be the appropriate discipline who would connect you with the tools and resources that you need, such as the adaptive or assistive utensils. So if it's something that you truly feel like you would benefit from, then the next time that you speak with your provider, I would say something like, hey, I'm having some trouble holding utensils, or I'm having a really hard time independently cooking on my own. I'd really like to see an occupational therapist who can help me with the right rehabilitation and connect you to all of those different, I'm sure there's a bunch of different devices and tools that I don't know about that would help somebody with Parkinson's. So I think it would be worth it to see a specialist. But yeah, if you just Google online assistive and adaptive utensils, then you can find it. Like they were even on Amazon.
Did you publish the cookbook, or is it just in your master's thesis?
This is yeah, it's a part of my master's project. So it's an ongoing thing where I'm like, I need to publish an actual book. But I'm just so busy. Like my job as a clinical dietitian is just all consuming. So one day there will be a book. But for now, if you go to my research article and you scroll all the way down to the bottom in the appendices, you'll see the actual cookbook. And you can print it out. So if you want to just print the pages that the cookbook is on, you can go ahead and do that. But yeah, no hard copy book yet.
Okay. How do you prepare? Now, this is probably its own, let's talk, but how do you prepare meals if you have maybe some general tips? If you have gastroparesis and you're lactose intolerant?
Yeah, that's definitely, there's a lot to get into with that. And maybe this would apply to some of the people in the audience. Maybe there's other people with Parkinson's who have gastroparesis. So gastroparesis is basically delayed gastric emptying, or you can think of it as the digestive tract slowing down. And for some people, it's very severe. For some people, it's more mild. It's kind of like a spectrum. Um, Again, it's hard for me to give general recommendations without working with somebody on an individual level, but generally for gastroparesis, you don't want to overconsume fiber because fiber also delays gastric emptying and slows down digestion, which is why fiber keeps us full for a long period of time, is because it's slowly broken down. And so for somebody whose GI tract is already moving very slowly, fiber may make that worse. Same thing with fat. Fat is another nutrient that slows down gastric emptying and takes a really long time to digest. So those two things, high fat foods, so like fried foods, and then high fiber foods, so like greens, whole grains, they just may make it harder to digest when you have a pre-existing condition like gastroparesis. And then for the lactose intolerance part, that's just a matter of either avoiding dairy, so finding an alternative to dairy like coconut milk, oat milk, almond milk, or buying the lactose-free milks and cheeses.
Well, thank you so much, Jelena. This was fabulous. And reminder to everyone, check out her other presentation. It was really, really great. And we appreciate you so much. Don't forget about our YouTube channel as well. There's some excellent content there to help you live better. Couple points of business I'd like to share. We are really excited. We've been chosen as an official charity partner of the big 5K race. Parkinson's Community Los Angeles has been selected. It's part of the Los Angeles Marathon, and we would love for you to join us in person or virtually to help us raise funds for our support groups and educational programs like this, and for the community. We have some great events coming up. Join us later this month to learn how you can contribute to one of the largest PD research studies in the world. We will also learn about new treatments that target off times in Parkinson's. Next month, we will learn about the Alexander technique for Parkinson's and the role of palliative care in PD. Links to register for these events, as well as updates for all our programs, will be sent out to you to our email list. So if you're not on that, make sure you sign up. But if you're here, I'm sure you are. Today's event was made possible by our sponsors, Abbott, Boston Scientific, Kiowa, Kieran, and by you. Go to PCLA.org and make a donation to help us improve the lives of families in our community who are living with Parkinson's. We are a nonprofit, and your donations are tax deductible. If you've enjoyed today's program, please consider visiting PCLA.org and make a donation to help us continue our important work. And as always, you can reach us with questions at info@pcla.org or by phone at 310-880-3143. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Good night.